Timbuktu, Africa's lost city of knowledge. In the vast stretch of the Sahara Desert, where sand whispers ancient secrets and the sun scorches the earth with timeless heat, there lies a city whose name once stood as a beacon of enlightenment, Timbuktu. Long before its name became shorthand in the West for a place remote and unknowable, Timbuktu was a center of learning, religion, commerce, and culture, an African jewel whose light once illuminated the intellectual world. Today, its memory is half-remembered, often cloaked in myth or dismissed as a relic of a forgotten age. But in truth, Timbuktu's story is one of brilliance, resilience, and the enduring power of knowledge. Founded in the 12th century by Tuareg nomads near a fertile curve of the Niger River, Timbuktu began as a seasonal encampment. Its strategic location at the crossroads of trans-Saharan trade routes soon transformed it into a thriving commercial hub. Caravans laden with gold from the mines of Bambuk, salt from the desert quarries of Tagaza, ivory, textiles, cola nuts, and slaves moved through this city like blood through the heart of the region. Yet what truly elevated Timbuktu was not merely its wealth, but its embrace of ideas. Through trade came not just goods but also cultures, languages, and beliefs. And in that convergence, the seeds of intellectual grandeur were planted. Timbuktu's ascent into a center of scholarship reached new heights under the Mali Empire, particularly during the reign of Mansa Musa, who ruled from 1312 to 1337. Musa's fabled pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 stunned the Islamic world, not only for the immense wealth he displayed but also for the message it conveyed, that the African interior, long underestimated or unknown by outsiders, was a land of faith, riches, and refinement. When Mansa Musa returned from the Hajj, he brought with him architects, scholars, books, and a renewed dedication to Islam and its teachings. He commissioned the construction of mosques and madrasas that would serve as places of both worship and learning. Among these was the Sankore Mosque, which would eventually evolve into the famed Sankore University, a beacon of intellectual life not just in Mali, but across the entire Islamic world. In Timbuktu, learning was sacred. The city's scholars, educated in both religious and secular subjects, taught theology, jurisprudence, mathematics, medicine, astronomy, philosophy, and grammar. Unlike the structured universities of Europe, Sankore operated on a personalized model, with students advancing through mastery and discussion, guided by the wisdom of a learned sheikh. Attaining the highest level of scholarship meant undergoing rigorous debate, the composition of original work, and public defense, a precursor to the modern doctoral process. At its height, the city boasted tens of thousands of students, a remarkable number given its size, and many traveled from far-flung corners of the Muslim world to study in its schools. The lifeblood of Timbuktu's intellectual legacy was its manuscripts. Written primarily in Arabic, but also in local languages using Arabic script, these texts covered an astonishing array of topics. Some were religious in nature, interpretations of the Quran, treatises on Islamic law, and Sufi poetry, but many dealt with science, mathematics, logic, medicine, geography, and history. Manuscripts delved into astronomy with precision rivaling European contemporaries, explored human anatomy and disease, chronicled historical events, and engaged in philosophical discourse. These weren't isolated texts but part of a scholarly tradition deeply rooted in African soil. Timbuktu was not mimicking the centers of learning in Cairo or Baghdad, it was contributing to them. Manuscripts were more than just scholarly tools, they were cherished family heirlooms. Private libraries were common among the educated elite, and some families maintained collections of hundreds or even thousands of books, passed down through generations. These manuscripts were carefully preserved, wrapped in cloth, stored in trunks, and perfumed to protect them from insects. To own books in Timbuktu was to possess status, knowledge, and piety. In a society where oral tradition was still strong, the written word was revered and guarded. Timbuktu's intellectual legacy continued to thrive even as the political landscape shifted. After the decline of the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, under rulers such as Askia Muhammad, continued to patronize the city's scholars and religious institutions. Timbuktu became even more integrated into the broader Islamic world, and its influence deepened. Scholars from North Africa, the Middle East, and beyond recognized its value. In the 16th century, Leo Africanus, a Moroccan-born traveler and geographer, visited Timbuktu and wrote admiringly of its devotion to learning, noting that its people spent vast sums on books and maintained a literary culture unparalleled in the region. But as with all golden ages, decline eventually followed. In 1591, Moroccan forces armed with early gunpowder weapons invaded and sacked the city. Timbuktu's leading scholars were captured and taken to Morocco. Its libraries were looted, its institutions dismantled. Though the city survived, it was never again the same. Political fragmentation, economic disruptions, and shifting trade patterns eroded its status. Over time, the city's intellectual treasures were hidden, forgotten, or left vulnerable. European colonization in the 19th and 20th centuries further distorted the city's legacy. Rather than recognize the sophistication of Timbuktu's past, colonial narratives portrayed it as a backward place, its history irrelevant or even non-existent. The manuscripts remained, but few in the outside world paid them heed. And yet, the people of Timbuktu never forgot. They continued to protect the manuscripts in silence, often hiding them in attics, caves, or underground storage. Families guarded them as sacred relics, even when their value was no longer widely recognized. In the late 20th century, renewed interest from Malian scholars and international researchers led to efforts to catalogue and preserve the texts. Foundations were created. Libraries were rebuilt. The world began to understand what had been nearly lost. Then, in 2012, catastrophe struck once more. Islamist militants linked to Al-Qaeda overran northern Mali and seized Timbuktu. In their campaign of religious extremism, they destroyed tombs, desecrated shrines, and set fire to libraries, branding the manuscripts heretical. The world watched in horror, fearing that a millennium of African knowledge might be reduced to ash. But the people of Timbuktu acted swiftly and courageously. At the heart of the effort was a man named Abdelkader Haidara, a scholar and librarian whose family had preserved manuscripts for generations. Working with a network of families, librarians, and volunteers, Haidara orchestrated a daring plan to smuggle the manuscripts to safety. Hidden in crates, rice sacks, and metal boxes, the texts were secretly transported on donkey carts, canoes, and motorcycles, past checkpoints and patrols, hundreds of miles south to Bamako, the capital. Against all odds, over 350,000 manuscripts were saved. Today, efforts continue to digitize and preserve these manuscripts. Organizations around the world, from libraries to universities to cultural preservation groups, are helping to make Timbuktu's treasures available to scholars and the public alike. Some texts are now accessible online, opening a new chapter in their history. Others remain in fragile condition, still awaiting restoration. But the knowledge endures. And more importantly, so does the spirit of the people who protected it. Timbuktu's story defies centuries of stereotypes about Africa. It challenges the colonial myth that Africa had no history, no writing, no civilization. It reveals a continent that was not only part of the global intellectual community, but a leader in it. It shows that black scholars debated theology and ethics, mapped the stars, practiced medicine, recorded history, and preserved their work with reverence and care. Timbuktu was a city where books were worth more than gold and scholars were held in the highest esteem. Its story is not one of decline, but of survival. Against the ravages of war, the distortions of colonialism, and the indifference of time, Timbuktu has persisted. What was once lost is now being found again. And with each manuscript digitized, with each story uncovered, the world is reminded that the desert once held a city of light. Timbuktu is not a myth. It is a legacy, one that belongs not just to Africa, but to humanity. It teaches us that knowledge is sacred, that culture must be protected, and that even in the harshest environments, brilliance can rise and endure.